It was supposed to be a routine interview, a well-produced, polished segment for the nationally syndicated show Today in Focus, hosted by none other than Trent Ralston. Ralston wasn't just any liberal host. He was the darling of the corporate media world, Harvard-educated, fond of $2,000 loafers, and fluent in the smug sarcasm of gotcha journalism. His viral clips often featured him cornering conservative guests, interrupting, smirking, then delivering pre-rehearsed lines that made the social media rounds by evening. The topic of the day, wasteful government spending in red states. Trent Ralston's producers had chosen Senator J.D. Vance as the guest, not to interview him, but to embarrass him. They were wrong. J.D. Vance had seen the pre-interview questions. He'd done his homework. And in his briefcase, under a leather folder, sat 3 pages of unredacted, line-by-line federal grant records that weren't just embarrassing. They were explosive. As the countdown clock hit 0, the segment went live in front of over 8 million viewers. Ralston smiled into the camera. Joining us now, Senator J.D. Vance from Ohio. Senator, welcome. I hope the mic picks up that Appalachian thunder you're famous for. He chuckled to himself. J.D. smiled calmly. It'll do just fine. Ralston's attack was quick. Senator, your district has received nearly $300 million in federal funds this year alone. How do you justify that spending when your party claims to stand for small government? Aren't you just rebranding handouts with red state flags? The audience laughed. Twitter lit up. Ralston leaned back, smug. But J.D.? He didn't flinch. He reached under the table, pulled out the folder, opened it slowly, and said with a quiet grin, "That's a great question, Trent, but here's the problem. That money didn't go to my state. It went to yours." Ralston blinked. J.D. continued, $2.4 million to a diversity and equity consulting firm with no employees. $3.8 million for a climate art installation outside a building that was just condemned for black mold. $14 million for a biometric surveillance study that never published a report. All in your district, all under your governor, all passed quietly in subcommittee without oversight. The control room erupted. Ralston froze. J.D. leaned back, smiled just enough, and said, "Tell me again about wasteful spending, Trent, because if you're looking for it, maybe turn your chair 180 degrees. The moment J.D. Vance finished his sentence, there was a 4-second silence. Not because the audio cut, not because Trent Ralston had a response, but because he had nothing. Then came the twitch, the fake chuckle, the classic pivot. "Well, that's certainly one interpretation, Senator." J.D. calmly raised a finger. "No, Trent, that's not interpretation. It's page 7 of your district's federal allocation ledger. You've either never read it, or you hoped no one else would." That clip, 13 seconds long, hit Twitter/X like a meteor. Within minutes, J.D. Vance folder trended to 1. Had Trent Ralston lied, shot up to 3. Screenshots of the government receipts Vance quoted were uploaded by watchdog groups, confirming every line item. TikTok exploded. A Gen Z creator edited the moment with the caption, "When you bring a knife to a folder fight." It got 3.2 million views in under 6 hours. YouTube creators dropped full breakdowns. How J.D. Vance destroyed a corporate narrative in 3 sentences. Ralston just got outspent in facts. This folder is a bigger bomb than WikiLeaks. Even center-left outlets couldn't spin it. One anchor sighed live on air. He didn't just show receipts, he handed out subpoenas. Meanwhile, Ralston's team scrambled. They issued a half-baked clarification tweet claiming J.D. took the numbers out of context. J.D. responded with a single screenshot, the actual budget document, with a yellow highlight over the exact $3.8 million climate art grant. Caption: "Context delivered." Comment sections were brutal. "You just got J.D.'d. Don't bring arrogance to a facts fight. This folder should run for office." Back in D.C., J.D.'s staff watched the explosion with quiet satisfaction. But Vance? He simply closed the folder, turned to an aide and said, "We're just getting started." At Global View Studios, home of Today in Focus, the mood had shifted from smug to panicked. Inside the glass-walled 14th floor conference room, the network's top producers, legal advisors and marketing execs sat in a hastily called emergency meeting. On the wall, the J.D. Vance clip playing on loop. On the table, a growing list of corporate sponsors threatening to pull funding. The head of ad sales spoke first. "We've already had 6 calls this morning. They're furious. 2 brands are demanding to know if we fact-check our hosts. and another just cancelled their Q4 spend. That's $2.2 million gone in one day. A senior VP of content sighed. He brought documents, guys. We sent Trent Ralston in there with talking points. Vance walked in with the entire federal ledger. What did you think was going to happen? Meanwhile, Trent Ralston sat alone in his dressing room, scrolling through Twitter/X. Every few seconds, a new meme. His frozen reaction with the caption, "When the receipts are real." A screenshot of JD holding the folder next to Iron Man's arc reactor, a photoshopped version of the folder labeled Liberal Career Ender. His phone buzzed. Text from his agent, "Crisis team activated. Stay off socials. Do not tweet." Too late. He'd already posted a reply trying to blame selective editing. And JD Vance had quote-tweeted it instantly. "Happy to send you the full recording, or the receipts again, or both." Over 70,000 likes in 40 minutes. The network knew they had a choice: issue a retraction and admit their host misrepresented the facts, or double down and watch more sponsors vanish. They chose a third option: go silent and wait for the storm to pass, but it didn't, because this time the public wasn't letting it go. Across the country, JD's calm, there's methodical takedown of arrogance with evidence became more than a viral moment. It became a symbol. People weren't just cheering for JD Vance. They were cheering for someone who came prepared when the media didn't. 3 days after the now infamous interview, JD Vance agreed to appear on Liveline America, a nationally syndicated town hall program hosted in front of a live audience. The producers were expecting a rehash of the Trent Ralston debacle. They didn't know JD had something else in mind. When he walked onto the stage, he wasn't carrying a folder. He was carrying a briefcase. The audience applauded. Some cheered. Others just sat up straighter because everyone knew something was coming. After 10 minutes of softball policy questions, the host leaned in. "Senator Vance, your recent appearance with Trent Ralston went, well, viral. Do you feel vindicated?" JD smiled politely. "It wasn't about me. It was about the American people finally seeing where their money is actually going." He leaned forward. "And since people seem to appreciate the first folder, I thought I'd bring a second one." He clicked open the briefcase, pulled out 3 new binders. Binder 1, unspent pandemic funds, $12, $6 billion in pending projects. Binder 2, consulting contracts for agencies with no public deliverables. Binder 3, duplicate federal programs, $850 million in overlap, zero accountability. The audience gasped, audible gasps. The host blinked. "Are these real documents?" JD nodded. "All public record, all legal, all ignored." He held up one page. "This is $2.1 million spent on an inclusive yoga curriculum, in a state that just slashed veteran housing programs by 40%. This is the reality, and the media didn't report it, because they'd rather debate what shirt I wore or how I talk." The crowd roared, and online, it was happening again. #JD Vance briefcase trended within the hour. Spending exposed hit 500,000 posts before midnight. Clips flooded TikTok and Instagram with titles like, "Vance just nuked the budget narrative. He brought a folder to a narrative war again." Even neutral news outlets admitted Vance's evidence is factual and deeply uncomfortable for federal contractors and media partners alike. And in D.C., senators from both parties started calling Vance's office, some angry, some scared, some impressed. But all of them knew the conversation had shifted because JD brought receipts. By Monday morning, JD Vance's binders had done more than trend. They'd triggered something D.C. hadn't seen in a long time: bipartisan public pressure. Phone lines at Capitol Hill were jammed, emails poured in by the thousands. People weren't just angry, they were organized. Veterans groups, small business associations, teachers' unions, retired military, even disillusioned former bureaucrats. The message was the same: why is my tax money funding ghost programs while I can't afford groceries? In response, JD Vance formally filed a resolution, the Taxpayer Transparency Review Act. The bill demanded full public accounting of all discretionary federal contracts over $500,000, sunset clauses on any program that hadn't shown public deliverables within 24 months, and the creation of an independent citizen auditor panel to review spending quarterly. Cable news anchors scoffed. This is political theatre. But behind closed doors, the panic was real. Because JD didn't just bring sound bites. He brought evidence that voters now wanted explained. One Liberal senator, normally hostile to JD, was overheard saying, "He's making it impossible to defend this waste." Another whispered, "We either support the review or look like we're hiding something." Meanwhile, Trent Ralston's show went silent. He hadn't appeared on air since the clip went viral. His producers tried to pivot with celebrity interviews and lighter segments, but viewership dropped by 43% in 1 week. Sponsors pulled ads. The folder had done what no boycott ever could. Back in Ohio, J.D. Vance held a town hall. 300 people showed up. One elderly woman stood up and said, "I watched the clip. I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, or Martian. You brought truth into a place that's allergic to it. Keep going." The room applauded. And J.D.? He didn't gloat. They laughed when I said I read the fine print. But now they're realizing the fine print is where the rot hides, and we're about to read all of it. With pressure mounting and J.D. Vance's legislation gaining unexpected momentum, the swamp did what it always does. It went personal. 2 major media outlets dropped coordinated pieces within hours of each other. Headlines screamed, "Senator Vance's hidden wealth ties. Is the folder just a distraction?" From hillbilly to hypocrite, J.D. Vance under new scrutiny. The allegations? A vague suggestion that J.D.'s wife's cousin once worked for a subcontractor who bid on a federal road project 6 years ago. A $23 discrepancy in a campaign filing already corrected and resubmitted. It was weak, and America knew it. J.D.'s response? He didn't deny, he didn't deflect. He invited the press into it. He posted his full financial disclosures with this caption, "You're not mad I have a folder. You're mad I opened it." Then, in a nationally televised town hall, he said, "I live in the same house I had before the Senate. I still drive the same truck. I still eat at Waffle House when I'm traveling. If you want to come after me, fine. But don't pretend exposing your $3 million diversity paddleboard study is a deflection." The crowd erupted. Clips of the speech outpaced the smear articles by 500% in engagement on social platforms. One viral meme summed it up. JD standing tall, headlines behind him burning. Caption, "You can't cancel receipts." Even some liberal journalists began to push back, not against JD but against the smear campaign. One tweeted, "Disagree with Vance on policy? Fine, but he's doing what journalism used to, following the money." Meanwhile, Ralston finally reappeared in a pre-recorded apology segment that aired to the lowest ratings his show had ever seen. Mistakes were made. We all should be more careful with facts. It was too late. Back on the Senate floor, J.D. Vance's bill picked up its first co-sponsor from across the aisle. A senator from a deep blue state stepped forward and said, "I don't always agree with the man, but he's right. We need transparency. Period." The Senate chamber buzzed with tension. The Taxpayer Transparency Review Act, J.D. Vance's bill, had made it through committee and was headed to the floor for a full vote. No one expected it to get this far, not the media, not the consultants, and certainly not the politicians who once laughed at the guy with the folder. But outside the Capitol, something extraordinary was happening. A line had formed. Hundreds of people, quiet, determined, stretched around the steps of Congress, each holding something in their hands. Not signs, not flags, folders, some manila, some red, some duct-taped together. Each one carried copies of local spending abuse, school district waste, forgotten audits, and closed-door grant deals that had never made headlines, but were painfully real. One woman held a binder labeled, "My Town's Broken Promises, 22 Years of Rot." A veteran stood next to her, folder tucked under his arm. "VA claims that vanished, my story." Reporters began swarming the line, but no one shouted. No one raged. They just waited, to be seen, to be heard. Inside, J.D. Vance stood up to speak one last time before the vote. He glanced at the gallery above, packed, silent. He paused, then said, "Out there right now are Americans who brought their own receipts. You ignored them for years. You mocked their accents. You funded pet projects while telling them the budget was too tight. And now they're showing up. If this bill fails, it won't be me you're voting against. It'll be the people holding those folders." No thunder, no dramatic music, just the uncomfortable truth echoing through the chamber. The roll call began. One by one, senators cast their votes, the usual party lines blurred, because no one wanted to go viral for voting against sunlight. The final count, 51 yes, 48 no, 1 abstain. The bill passed. Cheers erupted outside. Not screaming, not chaos. Just cheers from people who finally felt seen. The Taxpayer Transparency Review Act had passed, and in DC that meant one thing. A lot of people were suddenly very nervous. Agencies scrambled to prepare reports they had ignored for years. Consulting firms with six-figure contracts and no deliverables deleted websites overnight. PR teams for obscure federal projects began circulating vague press releases like, "We are reviewing our documentation and will ensure alignment with new compliance protocols." Translation? They got caught. Within 48 hours, watchdog groups filed 1,800 FOIA requests. Whistleblowers came out of the woodwork, now backed by a law that protected them and gave them a microphone. One viral video showed a young public school teacher testifying in a town hall. "We couldn't get new textbooks for 5 years, but someone approved $300,000 for a virtual mindfulness garden that no student has ever seen." It had 7.3 million views in 2 days. Meanwhile, J.D. Vance didn't gloat. He worked. His team helped local governments set up transparency dashboards. He hosted roundtables with Democrats and Republicans, not for the cameras, but for solutions. He quietly introduced a follow-up bill, the Contract Clarity Amendment, requiring public comment periods before non-competitive federal grants are awarded over $1 million. Back on cable news, Trent Ralston was quietly replaced. His network didn't announce it. They just filled his time slot with a rotating panel and said, "We're exploring new formats that better reflect evolving public trust." Translation? He became the face of arrogance, and the folder beat him. Even longtime skeptics of J.D. Vance admitted it. He didn't play their game. He flipped the board, and now they're the ones reading the rules. People across America began forming local folder groups, ordinary citizens meeting once a month to go through school board budgets, city council grants, and state contracts. Because one senator brought evidence, and reminded them they could too. The politics changed, but what came next? The culture changed. Something quiet but powerful began to take root across the country. People weren't just complaining about corruption anymore. They were documenting it, not screaming, researching, not fighting, filing. Across small towns and big cities, the phrase, "bring the folder," became a joke and a warning. Local journalists started investigating school board spending using the new law. High school seniors in civics classes presented budget breakdowns as final projects. City councils found themselves facing questions they hadn't heard in decades. Where exactly did that grant go? What's the actual deliverable here? Can you point me to the outcome? A YouTube creator started a show called The Fine Print Files. He wasn't famous. Not flashy, just a laptop, a mic, and a stack of documents. By month 3, he had over 2 million subscribers. J.D. Vance wasn't trending every day anymore, but his impact was. His quote was etched into walls of community centers, university auditoriums, and even a few tattooed forearms. The fine print is where the rot hides. Even media outlets changed. They began adding spending transparency segments to their coverage, not because they wanted to, but because their audiences demanded it. The shift was slow, but real. Cynicism was being replaced with something dangerous to corruption, awareness. And it all came from one moment, one folder, one calm voice refusing to be mocked, rattled, or silenced. At a speaking event, a teenager stood up during the Q&A and asked J.D., "What do you want to be remembered for?" J.D. paused. "Not the vote, not the bill, not the folder. I want to be remembered for reminding people that you don't need permission to ask where the money went." The crowd stood, not cheering wildly, just standing in respect, because they knew truth had been made fashionable again. It didn't happen overnight, but a year after the vote that changed everything, something quiet, permanent, and profound took place inside the Library of Congress. No press event, no red carpet, just a small glass display installed near the Rotunda's Civic History wing. Inside, a well-worn red folder. Next to it, a bronze plaque, the folder that asked where the money went. Donated by Senator J.D. Vance, 2025. People came from across the country to see it. They didn't just stare, they reflected. Some brought their kids, some left thank you notes. A retired accountant from Nebraska cried while explaining it to his grandson. In schools, teachers asked students, "What's your folder? What truth do you think is being ignored?" Students stood up and said, "Our lunch budget, our textbooks, the city park that was promised and never built." J.D. Vance never turned the moment into a brand. He didn't sell merch. He didn't trademark the phrase. He just kept showing up to work with facts, a quiet tone, and zero fear. One night, at a small dinner, a reporter asked him, "What made you bring the folder that day?" J.D. smiled, "Because I knew they'd bring cameras. And I thought America deserved more than sound bites. They deserved numbers, receipts, proof. And once the people see proof, they never unsee it." Back in Ohio, a mural was painted on the side of a forgotten post office. It showed J.D. standing in front of a podium, hand on a folder, looking not at the camera, but straight ahead, as if talking to anyone who'd ever been ignored. Above him, in bold white paint, "Don't raise your voice, raise your evidence." The Republic didn't forget, because the man who asked where the money went reminded the country who it belongs to.